You were not born only to shine. You were born to remember what casts the light. There is a part of you that no affirmation can reach, a silence that no achievement can quiet, a hunger that no praise can feed. It waits, not with claws, but with eyes, not to harm you, but to be seen. We call it the shadow. You may think of your shadow as your shame, your flaws, your anger, your envy, your failures. But that is only the skin of it. The true shadow is not evil. It is exiled power, forgotten hunger, repressed memory, abandoned self. Let me tell you a story. A woman once came to me, eyes bright with performance. She was kind, she said, always there for others, never raised her voice, never asked for much. But she could not sleep. She dreamed of a hallway lined with locked doors. Each night she walked it. Each door hummed, whispered, but she never opened them. When I asked her why, she said, "I'm afraid of what I've put inside." That is the shadow, what you buried to be accepted, what you silenced to stay safe, what you denied in order to be loved. So let me ask you this. What have you locked behind your inner doors? Pause. Let that question breathe inside you. You don't need to answer aloud, but you must be willing to listen to what stirs in the silence. That willingness in itself is sacred. You see, the shadow does not demand perfection. It asks for presence, not control, but contact. It does not say, "Heal me." It says, "Hold me," without flinching. Here is a deeper truth. What you fear in yourself is often the very thing you need to become whole. Your rage may hold your boundary, your sadness, your truth, your envy, your unlived life. The world tells you to run from these, to rise above, to stay positive, to let it go. But the psyche is not an enemy to be defeated. It is a landscape to be walked. And if you always ascend, you will miss the treasures buried in descent. The shadow is not the problem. Your avoidance of it is. So here, now, I invite you not to fight it, not to fix it, but to turn toward it, to say softly, "I am willing to know you." This is not a call to darkness. It is a call to integration, because the light you seek cannot be fully yours until you remember what you left behind. If this already resonates, ask yourself gently, have I mistaken suppression for strength? Have I confused being liked with being whole? Let these questions echo. They are not accusations. They are invitations. In dreams, the shadow often arrives disguised. A snarling animal, a dark figure with your face, a stranger whispering your secrets, a mirror you cannot look into. These are not punishments, they are instructions. The unconscious does not speak in sentences, it speaks in symbols. And when the shadow appears in a dream, it is not trying to scare you, it's trying to return. Return to the body that once abandoned it. Return to the voice that once silenced it. Because the shadow never truly leaves, it waits, in the tone you can't explain, in the reaction you regret, in the ache you hide from others. It waits, not to hurt you, but to be reclaimed. There was once a man who dreamed of a staircase spiraling downward. Each night he descended. The air grew colder, the walls closer. At the bottom, a door. He never opened it. He told me, "I don't want to know what's behind it." But the shadow does not vanish because you look away. It grows, it gathers, not as a monster, but as unmet selfhood. What we exile, we project. What we disown, we become, indirectly, unconsciously, destructively. That is why you find yourself snapping at the people you love. That is why you numb out at night. why you ache when nothing is wrong, why you cry when someone else raises their voice. The shadow leaks when it is not heard. It spills into moments where it doesn't belong, because it has nowhere else to go. So instead of asking, why am I broken? Ask, what part of me is unloved? Instead of saying, I shouldn't feel this way, say, what is this feeling asking me to see? These questions don't have easy answers, but they open a door. And the shadow doesn't need you to solve it. It needs you to stay. Stay through the shaking. Stay through the discomfort. Stay through the silence after the truth has been spoken. Because when you stay with the shadow, it begins to soften. It begins to shift. It begins to trust you again. If you're still listening, then part of you already knows. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be whole. You are not here to eliminate your darkness. You are here to sit beside it. You are not here to shine so brightly that no one sees your wounds. You are here to remember that wounds are doorways too. And so I ask you, gently, lovingly, can you be brave enough to stay? Can you stop fixing and start feeling? Can you let your shadow speak and not interrupt? Because if you can, a deeper light begins to rise. Not the light of performance, but the light you were taught to hide certain parts of yourself, not always with words, often with glances, silences, tension in a room. You learned which emotions were safe, which desires were welcome, which truths were too heavy for others to hold. So you became selective. You smiled when you were sad. You apologized when you were angry. You laughed when you wanted to scream, not because you were dishonest, but because you were trying to survive. The shadow is not born from malice. It is born from adaptation, from the small child who learns to be good, so they are not abandoned, from the sensitive soul who reads the room instead of reading their own body. And here is the wound. In making yourself acceptable, you made yourself incomplete. You see, the shadow is not just what's bad. It's also what's been buried. Your creativity, your sensuality, your power, your anger that could become boundary, your sadness that could become softness, your wildness that could become joy. These were not flaws. They were too big, too loud, too much for the world you were raised in. But being too much only means you were never meant to stay small. There is a moment in every healing journey when we stop asking, how can I be more like them? And begin to ask, what have I exiled to belong? That question, when asked with reverence, breaks the spell. Let me tell you what I've seen. I've seen a woman discover her anger after decades of people-pleasing. She was terrified of it. She said, if I let this out, I'll become someone I don't want to be. But I told her, if you don't let it out, you'll never become who you really are. That anger wasn't violence. It was clarity. It was the part of her that said, no more. No, thank you. I matter too. The shadow doesn't destroy the self. It defends it, but only if we allow it to come home. So ask yourself, right now, what part of me have I made a villain that was actually trying to protect me? What part of me have I demonized that only ever wanted to be seen? And can I turn toward that part with something new, not shame, not judgment, but welcome? If you're beginning to feel something stir, that is your shadow hearing your footsteps. That is the part of you you buried, sitting up, wondering if you've finally come to find it. Go slowly, but go. You don't need to have the right words. You don't need to fix anything yet. You just need to stop running. Because nothing in you is unworthy of love. not even the part that doesn't believe that. Let's talk about projection. Because when we do not face our own shadow, we see it everywhere else. We judge the anger in others because we have not made peace with our own. We are irritated by neediness because a part of us still longs to be held. We resent those who take up space because a part of us still believes we don't deserve any. This is not failure, it is reflection. The people who trigger you the most are often holding a mirror. And if you're willing to look into that mirror, not with blame, but with curiosity, you will begin to see the shape of what still wants your attention. I once knew a man who criticized everyone around him, their softness, their sensitivity, their emotion. And yet, in his dreams, he was always holding a weeping child, a child who looked just like him. He hated in others what he couldn't hold in himself. This is the secret. What you reject in others is often what you've rejected in yourself. So here is the challenge, the alchemy. The next time you feel judgment rise, pause. Not to repress it, not to justify it, but to ask, what in me does this moment reveal? Where have I abandoned myself? This is not always comfortable, but it is powerful, because the moment you stop projecting your shadow, you begin integrating it. And integrated shadow becomes fuel, not fire that scorches, but fire that warms. Do you remember the last time you felt truly alive? Not productive, not liked, but present. Maybe it was when you were dancing alone, or crying under a night sky, or saying the thing you were afraid to say and not being punished for it. That aliveness, that was your wholeness surfacing. That was your shadow meeting your light. You see, we don't become whole by staying in the light. We become whole by weaving what we've hidden into who we are, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming someone real. And the real self is always complex, always paradoxical, tender and wild, afraid and brave, wounded and wise. If someone tells you healing means becoming perfect, turn the other way. Healing means becoming true, and the truest people I've ever met carry their shadows like lanterns. They do not pretend to be all light, but they are not ruled by their darkness either. They have met themselves, and so they no longer run. The shadow speaks in many voices. Not all of them sound like fear. Sometimes it sounds like overhelping, over-explaining, over-giving. It says, if I care for them, maybe they won't leave. If I hold their pain, maybe they'll finally love me. If I make myself essential, maybe I'll be enough. And on the surface, this looks like kindness, but underneath, it's a contract, a hidden agreement. I will carry what is not mine, as long as I get to belong. But my friend, you were not made to earn love through sacrifice. You were not made to disappear to be seen. This is one of the hardest truths. Sometimes what looks like empathy is a mask for avoidance. Avoidance of your own needs, your own grief, your own unspoken rage. You become the caretaker because it's safer than being the one who needs care. You become the strong one because vulnerability once cost you something too great. You become the listener because you've forgotten what your own voice sounds like. This is shadow too, not because it is wrong, but because it is incomplete. Let me offer you this image. A woman stands in the center of a room. In her arms she holds everyone else's sorrow, their disappointments, their childhoods, their unshed tears. And in the corner, a small child version of herself sits quietly, waiting to be picked up. She doesn't cry. She knows better. She's watched for years as the adult version of her chose everyone else. But the time comes when the woman looks down and sees the weight she's been carrying was never hers, and she kneels, not to serve another, but to hold herself, to whisper, "I see you. I choose you now." This is the moment everything changes, not because pain is gone, but because it has been recentered, reclaimed. If you find yourself exhausted from being everything for everyone, ask yourself, who was I before I believed love must hurt? What would I be if I stopped holding what isn't mine? These are not abstract questions, they are sacred thresholds. To ask them is to step away from performance and into presence. You are not here to be a container for other people's ghosts. You are here to be a mirror for their soul, but only after you have become a mirror for your own. There is a myth, one that runs silent beneath many lives, that to be lovable you must be light, bright, positive, forgiving, safe. But the soul does not respond to perfection. The soul responds to truth. And the truth is, you are not only made of light, you are made of shadow too. You carry rage and gentleness, you carry grace and grief, you carry hunger and holiness side by side. To deny one is to weaken the other. To ignore your anger is to dilute your love. To repress your sorrow is to flatten your joy. Real wholeness does not come from choosing one over the other. It comes from learning to hold both. I've worked with people who tried for years to rise above their pain. They meditated it away, forgave it prematurely, spoke affirmations over it until their voices cracked. But what they didn't do was feel it, fully, directly, with their feet on the ground. You cannot heal what you still fear. You cannot release what you have not yet held. There is an image I come back to again and again, a forest at night. No light, no map, just the sound of your own breath and the knowing that something waits in the trees. Most people turn back. They build fires on the edge of the forest. They call it enlightenment. They call it awakening. But the real transformation, it waits inside the forest. And the shadow, it is not there to eat you. It is there to guide you. But it cannot lead until you're willing to follow it in. This is descent. This is initiation. And this is where you begin to remember not who the world told you to be, but who you were before the world told you to forget. I am Kuums through the imprevention of 98 hymn, of the skied of world, a shadows for breath of us county is japti with this arrow. If your knees are shaking, good, that means you're close. If something in you wants to turn away, stay. Stay one more breath. Say aloud if you need to, I am willing to see what I've hidden. I am ready to feel what I've avoided. I am becoming who I truly am. Not later, now, not when it's safe, but because it matters, because your shadow is not the opposite of your light, it is the path toward it. Now we must speak of boundaries, not as barriers, but as sacred membranes. A shadow integrated is not one that fuses with others, it is one that learns where it ends and others begin. Empaths, sensitives, seekers so often confuse love with merging. They absorb, they fix, they bleed. But to be whole, you must learn to feel without dissolving, to care without collapsing, to say, I see your pain, but I will not carry it for you. I hear your sorrow, but I do not confuse it with mine. This is not coldness, this is warmth with a spine, because compassion without boundaries is not love, it's leakage. And if you do not learn to contain your energy, your shadow will become porous, and others will unknowingly walk through you as if you were not even there. I once worked with a healer who said, I feel everything, I cry for everyone. And I asked her, do you ever cry for yourself? She paused, and then she wept, not for the world, but for the self she had abandoned in her rush to be of service. That was the first time she stopped performing empathy and began living from integrity. Your shadow doesn't just hold pain, it holds your no, your edge, your flame. To ignore it is to walk the world like an open wound, mistaking depletion for duty. But to claim it, that's when your no becomes clean, clear, holy. Because the self, the true self, does not ask for endless sacrifice, it asks for alignment. Let me ask you this. Where in your life have you said yes when your whole body whispered no? What agreements have you kept not out of love, but out of fear? And what would happen if you stopped apologizing for needing space? These are not rhetorical, they are rituals. Every clear boundary you set is a spell that says, I am here, I exist, I remember who I am. This too is shadow work, not just facing the dark, but holding your shape within it.
Let's end where we began, with the knowing that you were never broken, only fragmented, pieces of you scattered across time. Some hidden in silence, some buried under roles, some folded in others, hoping to be loved through them. But now, you begin to gather them, one part at a time, one breath at a time. The angry part you silenced to stay kind, the grieving part you ignored to stay strong, the wild part you tamed to stay safe. They are all waiting, not to be rescued, but to be rejoined. This is the true reunion, not with someone else, but with yourself. Can we give you one final image? A figure stands before a mirror, but instead of seeing their reflection, they see only the faces they've worn for others. The caretaker, the strong one, the pleaser, the achiever, the wounded child, the spiritual seeker. All masks, all honest in their time, but none of them whole. And then, in the mirror, a new image forms, a face that does not perform, does not reach, does not apologize. It simply is, quiet, powerful, rooted, real. That is the self, the one who has walked through the shadow and returned, not cleansed, not perfect, but present. So let me say this, if you have felt haunted by your darkness, you are not alone. If you have feared that something inside you was unlovable, you are simply listening to a voice that never got to speak. If you have chased the light only to feel more lost, it's because your soul was never asking you to ascend. It was asking you to descend, to meet yourself in the soil, in the stillness, in the sacred dark where nothing is performing and everything is true. That is where your shadow lives, and that is where your light waits, not above, but through. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be healed to be holy. You don't need to be bright to be worthy. You only need to be willing to be with what's real, to stop abandoning yourself, to love the part that still doesn't know how. That, right there, is the doorway. So walk through it, not as someone trying to be good, but as someone ready to be whole. Your shadow is not your enemy, it is your invitation. And if you can sit with it, name it, witness it, you will find the center of all you feared was never a monster, only a part of you that thought it had to stay hidden to survive. Now you are free. So if something in you softened, if something in you stirred, stay with it.
There's one more thing after the descent, after the mirrors and shadows and tears. You must return. Return to your life, to the small moments, to the dishes, the emails, the conversations. But something is different now. You don't smile to please. You smile when it's real. You don't say yes to avoid rejection. You say yes because your soul says so. You don't carry pain that isn't yours because you finally know how to hold your own. This is the secret the world rarely teaches. Healing is not becoming someone new. It is remembering who you were before you began to forget, before the roles, before the shame, before the masks. And when you return from your shadow work, you do not glow with purity. You resonate with presence, not because you are untouched, but because you are integrated. People may ask what changed, and you won't always have words, because some transformations are not spoken, they are embodied. You'll walk differently, not louder, but deeper. You'll speak differently, not to impress, but to connect. You'll love differently, not to fill a hole, but to meet someone from wholeness. This is the path of shadow work, not a path to perfection, but a path back to truth. And if you have walked even one step of it today, I honor you. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are not too much. You are returning. And you are becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. Now the work begins. Quietly, sacredly, in you.